المملكة العربية السعودية. مشروع الملك عبد الله بن عبد العزيز لتطوير التعليم العام. برنامج تطوير المدارس.
الحسين هيشور, I am strategy and technology lead. I think the schools in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, much like schools in the Arab region as a whole and everywhere in the world, are entering into sort of a new phase, if you wish, of both challenges and opportunities. And I think one of those forces affecting what's happening around schools is certainly globalization. And globalization brought to the foreground a set of opportunities and challenges. Opportunities in the fact that you have a whole world open to you, but also challenges because you are competing with everybody else. But also opportunities that are opened with the spread of information and communication technology. You look at Saudi Arabia in the 21st century, and the diffusion and the penetration of information communication technology is amazing. And unless we do something about that, we risk having obsolete schools, because schools are moving at a much lower pace than society as a whole is moving. So in my view, one of the things that our schools need to pay attention to is this school-to-career transition. And it's important because with the new opportunities available through globalization, we need to prepare our kids, we need to prepare our youth to seize those opportunities. In my view, if we look and if we empower the schools to develop that capacity to plan and to strengthen partnerships with the private sector and with the local communities, then they can certainly open the horizons that are available for our students. And I always think of Saudi Arabia as being the strongest and the biggest economy in the Arab world. The opportunities are simply infinite. But we haven't, unfortunately, seized them, at least seized them in such a way that we can leverage them to help and support our kids. Going back to the issue of school-to-career transition, if you look at middle schools and if you look at high schools, I think there are opportunities to introduce, for instance, entrepreneurial skills development. That is something that we need to pay attention to. We are not preparing our kids simply to work for the government. We also need to develop their capacity to be entrepreneurs of the future. How do you do that? And I think it's not a question of choice here. It's not a dichotomy between having a curriculum and extra curriculum. It's rather embedding those skills that will make our kids more competitive in the future and entrepreneurs of the future. How do we do that? We have a lot of experiences, and personally, having worked in close to 25 countries, both in the Arab regions and everywhere else, I could share with you perhaps some of those best practices. It all starts, first of all, with building those bridges with the private sector in the community. I think it's very easy. In Saudi Arabia, if you look at the service sector in Saudi Arabia, from banks, insurance companies, to the media as well. So there is a chance to build those partnerships at the level of the school if we can empower the schools to strengthen those partnerships. If we can have a day, say, called the Career Day in the middle schools or even in high schools, that's already enough to give an example of our students of what those careers are around them. Of course, we could never predict what the future would look like, nor what the careers would be in the future. But if we build that entrepreneurial spirit, those 21st century skills that our kids need, then whether it's one career or the other, at least we have built the ability, what I call the employability skills. So I'm not here arguing to prepare them for jobs. I am rather arguing for employability skills. The ability, for instance, to perceive an opportunity, the ability to design a solution for a problem. Those are small issues, but in the big realm of things, I think they would make a big difference. Certainly, information and communication technology has opened lots of opportunities for us to seize. And I think with the orientation of the Ministry of Education to decentralize decisions to the schools, I think empowering schools to plan those partnerships with the private sector and with the community to open those horizons, I think, would be a wonderful idea. We don't just address issues when the kids have graduated from universities and we start thinking about employment and employability. Rather, we need to embed it from day one in our schools so that the kids develop both an ability to understand the horizons that are open to them, but also develop those employability skills. I think the introducing those type of employability clubs at the mid-level and middle school, then you can start really raising awareness about those kinds of employability sort of skills that you want to introduce early on. The whole point about empowering the schools and giving them that capacity to strengthen those partnerships is really the whole point about the next generation of educational reforms. We don't want those partnerships to be imposed from the top. You can never do it because every school has specificities in its own community, but we want to empower the schools. And this is really where the whole idea of these excellence centers, these planning teams at the level of district, those I think it should be one of their critical and key functions to build and strengthen those partnerships, both in the short and long term. So at the level of the high school, you can think, of course, multiple models for building those school-to-career bridges, which for me is really a fundamental thing to deal with. You can start as well opening internship opportunities, whether during the vacation or during the summer, whatever their nature is. But you start really building those bridges that are so important in the lives of the students down the road. By focusing on employability and by school-to-career transition, I am not saying that we should really downgrade the other functions that the schools do. Schools continue to do what they have traditionally been able to do. But I think we should really be focusing more on the new challenges that are posed to us by globalization and information and communication technology, because that's very important. If you think of the community of a school as more than just an aggregation of homes, if you think of that community as also as a wealth of assets, a wealth of intellectual assets. Every community is surrounded by parents who could be engineers, who could be media specialists, who could be marketing specialists, who could be business people. But so far, our schools have been closed to those types of expertise and assets. And what I'm arguing for is that we should really open the schools to start inviting those people back to our schools. I could invite an engineer to do a presentation on engineering to the students. It's nothing in the life of an engineer, but it's a big thing in the life of our kids. I could invite a police officer to come to the school. It's nothing perhaps in the life of the police officer, but it's a big thing in the life of our students. We suddenly start expanding those horizons for our students. And again, I'm not expecting the Ministry of Education to be doing those type of things for the schools. I think what I'm expecting the Ministry of Education to do is to empower the schools through regulations that would allow them to tap into those assets of those schools. And again, talking from experience in other places, whether it's in Asia or in Africa or in the Middle East, my experience has taught me that the school, if it has that particular regulatory framework that would allow it to tap into that expertise, then it could solve a number of issues having to do with developing the capacities for the kids. But you cannot expect, of course, the regulatory framework alone to produce these kinds of arrangements. You have as well to build the capacity of our leadership. And I think this is where the principals come in. A principal who firmly believes and who pursues these kinds of partnerships as part of his leadership repertoire, as it were, is also a principal who will be opening those kinds of opportunities. So for me, when talking about Saudi Arabia and talking about the biggest economy in the Arab region, I think the opportunities are there. I think it's certainly, there is a political will to open those kinds of opportunities. I think what we need to do is to focus more on building the capacity of our principals, building the capacity of those teachers and teacher leaders in our schools. And I think the community would be more than willing to tap in and to open those opportunities. Certainly, if you look at communication, information, and communication technology, I want to go back to it as we can start thinking about building those networks around certain businesses as well. I think Saudi Arabia is committed to diversifying the economy. That's a huge thing. And I think the government is also fully aware that the most sustainable asset in the long term is not oil, that the most sustainable asset is human beings. And because Saudi Arabia is a very youthful nation, then you are really talking about an untapped wealth. So what we need to do basically is to start rethinking about priorities with respect to how we link back to the private sector and to the community at large. How do we empower our schools so that they can start bridging those types of partnerships? And how do we build the capacity of our teacher leaders and our principals to do it? Now, the returns on investment, of course, is huge here. The return on investment is not simply kids who will be doing better in exams or in the use of technology. It's rather in the long term, kids who have larger horizons, who are dreaming big, as it were. But to go back to the point I said earlier, and somebody, a very seasoned American educator said, you know, right now we are preparing our kids for jobs that don't exist yet, using technologies that have not been invented yet to address problems that we don't know yet are problems. So to go back to that point, I'm not arguing that we should really prepare kids to be accountants or something of the sort. I'm simply saying that the world that we are living is already changing very fast, let alone for the future generation that will be graduating in 15 and 20 years. Those will be surrounded by radical changes in Saudi Arabia, and I think unless we prepare our schools now to start seeing those opportunities at the local level, we will be left behind, as it were, with respect to the societal changes. Because society is moving very fast, our schools are not. Society is moving because of information and communication technology, where parents, where community has access to a wealth of information. Our school is not moving with that speed. So unless we bring back our schools to go in the same pace of speed as the society is, we risk having obsolete schools in the long term. So who is going to make all this happen? I talked about principles, but I think the key to all change are teachers. They are the single most important school-based factor that will influence our kids. And I think we need to focus our investments on enabling those teachers to see the new opportunities that are open to us. And I think the King Abdullah General Education Development Project is on the right track with respect to putting all its investment on building those capacities. So if you look at it systemically, at the issue systemically, I think we have an opportunity here to address with issues of the future and the opportunities available for the future through the interventions that we do now. And I think we have models in place that we can certainly prototype, test and learn from, but certainly the political will is there, the finances is there, and the ideas in there. And I think with all that, Saudi Arabia is in fact in a unique position to make it happen. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
المملكة العربية السعودية مشروع الملك عبد الله بن عبد العزيز لتطوير التعليم العام. برنامج تطوير المدارس.